Hello and welcome to another episode of Fan the Flames Coaching with me, Robert Stevenson. I am super excited to be talking with Alison Muir. She is the founder of Alison Muir Coaching. She's a confidence cultivator, and I love the sound of that. It's like kind of this sort of gently moving and shaping our confidence as we grow. But she also does a lot of work with positive intelligence. So that's something we're going to dive into on the show today. And I also want to say that you're an author, Alison, but have I got that wrong?
That is wrong, although I have been quoted in an article or two, but yeah, I haven't written a book yet.
Yet, haven't written a book yet, but you have quotation marks after you, which is absolutely awesome. So Alison and I, we've known each other for what, 5, 6 years?
Yeah, about 6 years, yeah.
6 years, and we met in the coaching training space, and since then Alison's gone on to do amazing things and work with a whole range of people. But I guess I would love to start with Alison. It's like, so how did you get into coaching in the first place? How did that story begin?
Well, I think as a child, I was always the person that people would come to and talk to about their troubles, either with the parents who were annoying them or the grandparents or whatever, things like that. I was just one of those people that people would confide in naturally and found it easy to talk to. And then I ended up in the corporate world in a job that I hadn't really planned to be in because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And quite soon, quite early on, sort of in my early 20s, I became a team leader. So I was working with a food and drink manufacturing company, loads of household name brands, and suddenly I was this team leader. And in fact, I was a leader for one of the women who trained me when I came in. And, it was quite a weird turnaround for me to suddenly now be her manager and to have to give her appraisals and performance conversations and things like that. So I learned very quickly that there were so many different ways of approaching people. There were so many different ways of having conversations with people through that process. So I had this lady that I had been trained by, so looked up to, and she'd been there for donkey's years. And there's me thinking, who am I to give her any sort of career advice? Plus, she didn't want it; she just wanted to show up at work. But then on the other side, there was a team that had been merged into my team, and there was some resentment there because they felt that our particular department had taken over their department, and why hadn't they been given that chance? So I had that to deal with. And then I ended up with recruiting somebody who really wasn't up to the job. I mean, on the first day, they called in sick due to stress, but it was only an order processing job. It wasn't really highly stressful. So kind of wasn't good from that beginning. And then I then had to work with HR and put a performance improvement plan in place. And so I learnt very quickly on the hoof what was going on. And through that process with this particular person, they ended up deciding that the job wasn't for them, that it wasn't what they wanted to do. But they said to me that what they really valued was the support I'd given them, and that they found it was a really positive experience, and that they'd come to their own conclusion. And it wasn't that they felt that we'd forced them out or anything like that. So it was a wonderful result all round because they were making the right choice for them, and which was ultimately the right choice for the business. So from that point on, I quite enjoyed those conversations, having those open and honest conversations. And then I noticed that most of my team manager peers would run away from them. They'd sort of like, oh no, don't want to have that conversation. That's going to be awkward. Oh, I've got to tell them they're not doing very well, or, I've got to be honest and give them some constructive feedback. But I loved that opportunity because I could see the biggest change in people through that conversation. And yes, people would get emotional, or they'd be upset at the beginning, or maybe angry at the beginning, but they knew 100% I was there for them and that I was working with them to help them achieve whatever they wanted to achieve, but also address what was falling short in terms of the company. So I loved that change, that transformation, and found that the most rewarding part. But alongside that, I also noticed that people would show up at work with these sort of ideas of who they should be or who they needed to be to progress. And sometimes, it was a really fundamental thing about that person, that individuality, that individuality, and it was a core of who they were, but they didn't feel able to be that person in the workplace for whatever reason. And I saw the barriers coming up between them and other people, and also between the other people and themselves and those people, because they knew that there was something wrong. They knew that they weren't being authentic with them. And I heard a quote the other day from Gabor Mate, who'd said that we have a need for attachment and authenticity, but when authenticity threatens attachment trumps authenticity. So, if you want to feel that you belong, it's that you can't be who you are. And I saw that creating negative impact on both the person, but the team. And so I was really curious about how to help people be the best version of themselves, be authentically themselves in every instance. So not just in the workplace, not just limited to career. I really wanted to dive into that. How can you be who you are everywhere you show up and be happy doing that? Because, that's that ripple effect. If you're in a really good, positive place, you're open to connecting to other people, that's going to create such a positive ripple around the world. Everybody that you come into contact with is going to know that about you, is going to have that really positive experience. And know that you're there for them because you've got a space to do it. You're not constantly on guard, constantly protecting yourself. So, yeah, that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of where I came from and where I got to, which led me to leave my career and start training.
And I love that. I mean, here at Fan the Flames, we're all about that idea of how do we fan someone's spark to turn it into a roaring fire. And it feels like from a really early age, that was just something that you were naturally good at. You were naturally good at sitting in space with people and hearing what they had to say and asking questions that allowed them to think about it, as opposed to just telling them what to do. And that instance where, somebody isn't in the right job, but they're in the organization, and having conversations with them to allow them to recognize that actually this isn't the right place for me, and feel that you didn't get rid of them, but felt that you actually held a space for them to explore, well, where is that right place for me? Where can I go? And where can I be? And where can I be where I can both be authentic and belong? Because I think that's a huge, huge one for people, is that, how can I be who I am and feel a sense of belonging? I'm actually just about to start reading Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
Oh, I've just read that. Brilliant book. Just a brilliant book. I love it.
And I love her work, and I really remember when I read Daring Greatly, where she talked about taking off the armor. It really struck a chord with me about this idea of, we travel around with these masks or with this armor on, protecting ourselves from the outside world. But in doing that, the outside world doesn't get us. We don't get to show up. We don't get to share, and people don't get that greatness that exists within us.
Yeah, that light is shielded. Nobody else can bask in that light because you've hidden it away. And I remember doing a post on LinkedIn years ago about wearing suits to work and how people wear these suits to work. And it's like a suit of armor, that you put a suit of armor on to protect yourself in the workplace. And there were so many comments about, yes, I absolutely use my wearing a suit as a way to put this artificial barrier between me and potential, I don't know what they thought they were going to get at work, but there was a perception that they needed that barrier, they needed that armor around them to survive in the workplace, which is really sad. If you think
and I also think that that armor is about fitting in, because not so much now, but back in the day when we were all in offices and we took briefcases to work, we'd go into organizations and everybody would dress similar. In different organizations, it would be different, but there was this similarity. And I think that speaks to that piece where you were saying about, belonging and people wanting to belong and to fit in. So going, right, how do I dress so I fit in? And even as I say that, I think that even now, there's an organization that I do some work with, and they talk about not being a suited, booted culture, being a much more relaxed culture. But I notice we all are the same kind of relaxed. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. No, I can well imagine. And I think one of the things that I think really struck me was reading Bronnie Ware's book on the top 5 regrets of the dying, and that the top number one regret was that the person wished they'd lived life true to themselves and not the life other people expected of them. And I could see it happening in the workplace, and you can still see it happening now, that people aren't living life true to themselves. They're doing what they think they need to do, what they've been told is expected of them, and that just makes everything, life and everything, a bit smaller in my mind.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because as coaches and personal development people and therapists and that sort of helping profession, we explore a lot of what is authentically you. What is that you that's hidden away or possibly hidden away that we can get out or we can turn up? Because sometimes it's just that you've turned it right down, so we can't quite hear you. So how do we turn that up? How do we get the volume going? And yet sometimes I notice myself in environments where I go, wait, I'm not quite being myself. And noticing how sometimes external factors have an impact on me and pull me away from being who I want to show up as. And I'm always curious about what's going on when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's when we grow up, it's that fitting in, that making meaning of stuff, and we all make meaning of the experiences that we have, and who knows how we've got that meaning. I mean, it might make sense to nobody else apart from us, but something in that environment has suddenly gone, okay, that means something, and I need to respond in this way in order to still be accepted, because that's survival, isn't it? That to belong and to be accepted is all about that need to survive. Even though we're no longer in small tribes crossing the savannah, we still need to survive in the world, and even though we're connected across the world through social media or whatever else, I don't believe that that sense of true connection is happening, that really where I can be myself everywhere. Because in social media, there's a lot of judgment, isn't there, or perceived judgment. If so-and-so is going on such a lovely holiday, well, where's my holiday pics? Can I share them? And do I really want to share about the bit where it's not worked out for me and I'm feeling crap? We don't. We edit constantly, don't we? We edit our lives and who we are.
And I guess that a little bit of what we're speaking about here is how do we show up in our raw, full self, warts and all, and be okay about it, accept, because I guess there's a part here about how do we accept ourselves so that we don't need others' acceptance. So how can we be okay with how we are and who we are, so that when we go out in the world, it's like, well, it doesn't matter what's happening out there. I'm okay with who I am. And perhaps that's the work that we do. I'm thinking about it. Perhaps that's at the core of what I do, is creating a self-acceptance and a self-validation, so that when you're out in the world, you don't need to seek it from the external. You've already got it inside. But every now and again, the outside rocks us in a way that it's a little bit hard to find it, and we have to kind of go in a little search for it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's so true. It's that self-worth, that self-belief, that inner knowing of yourself and being comfortable with who that is. That's where it comes from. It can't come from outside. It's got to come from within. And I think that's the beauty of working with a coach who is curious about who that person is inside and allows that exploration and acceptance of themselves. And you can feel a softening. I mean, I read Susan Cain's Quiet book, and that set off so many, so that's why I behave like, that's why I don't like doing phone calls, I prefer email, that's why I do that, and just having that somebody else saying my truth and explaining that's it, that experience was normal because I'm an introvert, and that's what my normal experience would be. So suddenly I felt normal all of a sudden.
Isn't it beautiful when somebody puts language to that? And so we can go, oh, wait a minute, because even though we know others experience it, we still need to kind of hear it to fully lean into it. A friend of mine the other day was going to a conference, and they said to me that just before they got out of the taxi, they savored those moments of being on their own and just comforted their introvert self before they had to step out and be in the world with other people. And I thought that was just such a beautiful recognition of, this is what I need. I need to just savor this moment on my own before I go out, because being an introvert, being out in the world, can be quite challenging and daunting and even draining.
Yeah, very much so. Very energy draining. And that's something I come up with my clients a lot, is sort of like, are you creating space in your day to be by yourself? And no, because we're constantly on, there's constantly meetings coming in, there's no space between things to just be. And that is huge for introverts. We end up the day just sort of like collapsing on the sofa and zoning out on Netflix just because we can't cope with anything else. And I remember when I was in my corporate career, we would go to these corporate training events or, the annual conference, and it would be great to be with the whole company and sharing the journey and all this sort of stuff. But guaranteed at the end of that conference or the end of the training, I would have to go back to my room and just lie on the bed and not talk to anybody for about an hour, because I just didn't have anything left to give, because I was constantly trying to extrovert for an entire day. And everybody else would go down to not everybody, but a lot of people would go to the bar, or they'd go to the gym if there was one, or they'd go to walks together. They'd all want to carry on socializing. And I always felt really odd that I was antisocial and a misery guts, because I went, no, I've just got to go back to my room and just be quiet. Then I can come back in the evening and I'll be happy and pleasant and conversational again. But just give me an hour.
This is really interesting because, often I guess I'm perceived as an extrovert, and I might be, but I also have real introvert traits as well. So I know if I've been with people a lot, and whether that's coaching or training or socializing, then I need my cave time. I need my time where there's nothing going on. There's no TV, or just TV where you can just look at and not have to engage or think about, or just a quiet room, just to kind of recharge my batteries or come back to the self. And it's really interesting that, whether we're introverts or extroverts, there is still that necessity of sort of, I don't know, refueling perhaps, or recharging.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been working with a director recently, and giving her permission to give herself permission to give herself some time. It's that sort of, once you know that's what you need and it actually keeps you on top of your game, then it's hugely empowering to be able to do that, and create that space, because that you're going to be doing a better job as a result of it. I mean, I limit how many clients I would see in a day, because the way I work is I'm so involved in what I'm hearing and so intense. And I think that's with all coaches. We're so listening to everything and listening to what's not being said as well as what is being said, and gauging that what the person is saying in their story, that we're so involved in it. It's a huge amount of concentration. If I just went from one to the next to the next to the next, then by the end, that person at the end just wouldn't get the attention that they deserved, and they wouldn't get the best of me. So actually honoring that part of what we need is a massive step forward. And it's not just in coaching, it's in every single aspect of work or being with people, because you can't be present if you're exhausted. You can't give someone your time if you're zoned out.
Yeah, and I think, there's something really interesting there about this idea of, regardless of what our profession is, how do we give ourselves that time so that we can be at our best and we can be present, whether that's going for a walk, whether that's reading, sitting quietly, meditating, whatever that might be for us, so that we can be our best in the space. And you talked about being an introvert yourself, and your clients being introverted, or needing to find that space for themselves. And it makes me think about, when we talk about confidence, how do those things sort of come together, where we have that kind of introvertedness and that confidence? Because often confidence is seen as an external extrovert behavior. I don't believe that's the case, but often that's what it's perceived as. So I'm just curious about what's your sort of exploration or thinking around that.
Yeah, so I mean, you can see it in a lot of companies that confident people, those who speak out most or have an opinion, are often seen as competent as well as confident, which the two don't always equate. And the more quietly spoken, more reserved and more reflective people are not seen as confident. Whereas, in fact, somebody who takes that time to reflect and look at everything from different angles, gain different perspectives, and really come up with a thoughtful and thought through solution, can be very confident in the delivery of it if they're given the space to do that. But unfortunately, most of the time, although introversion's now sort of more recognized in the workplace, more people are more aware of it, the meetings are still probably 90% the talkative people and 10% the less talkative people. There aren't the frameworks in place in businesses to make sure everybody has an opportunity to share their view, and sometimes we lose that point of view. But in have you read Deep Work by Cal Newport?
Oh, yes.
It's just it speaks to me and my love of working deeply and having that time to explore, because when we're given that space to think and to just let our minds wander, it's not actually that they're wandering, they're making those deeper connections, they're bringing together ideas that you would never get if you just keep speeding through life. Those things that could never just happen if you think about them really hard. You need that subconscious, you need that processing time, and that's an introvert strength, is that processing, taking stuff away, letting it just sort of like knit together in their mind and going, oh well, I'd never thought of that before, because we're constantly to the next meeting, answer the email, answer the phone, and that ability to make those interesting and more insightful solutions are lost a lot of the time through speed and necessity.
I think of it as percolating. The idea that you've got to just let something just sit and ruminate for a while, and just a bit like a slow cooker, just going to let it take its time before it's ready to kind of be there. And one of the things that I try to do, because I don't succeed all the time, so I attempt to, rather than try, I attempt to do. I use that language. Is I have a day a week that is where I book no meetings, no training, no emailing, just a day to think. And I might do some reading, do some walking, do some mind mapping. And it's just a space to go, oh, what's that thought that's floating around? And what does that connect with? And how does that connect over there? What does that do? And I'll capture some thoughts and ideas. And then the next day I'll action that. Just trying to create that space that allows you to do that. And it doesn't have to be a day. I know for some people, it's just that walk in the afternoon or that run in the morning, that space where nothing else is happening and you're not focused on a particular thing. that allows, and it's not sleep, because sometimes people go, well, I'll just go to sleep and I do the percolation in the sleep. I go, yeah, that can work. So I know
Yeah.
that, you know, there are days when I'm stuck, and then the next day after a night's sleep, I go, that's the way forward.
Yeah.
But there's something really powerful about consciously taking time out to think, to process, to allow emergence to take place.
Yeah. And, you know, so, and which organizations encourage that? You know, where do you see that happening in day-to-day life, where that sense of inaction is valued, where, you know, you're not having to say, well, I think this and this is my solution and let's take action now. And, you know, that space isn't being created. And there's a sense of, you know, if you're not constantly busy, this busyness of life is actually rife throughout business. If you're not busy, then you're not doing anything. And there's this misperception that you're not doing anything if you're thinking.
Yes.
Well, in fact, you are. You're doing a huge amount, but you need to be able to do it without distraction. And I think that's one of the other things that introverts have struggled with, this move to open plan workspaces. You know, I used to work in supply chain, and there was quite a few, I'd say 50-50 introverts and extroverts in there, but we were often situated with the IT team, who were generally more introverted, and the finance team were quite often introverted. Lots of data people, lots of numbers in boxes, lots of analysis and technical stuff. And we kind of got to this happy place where the office was generally quiet, and if there was a loud person in there, it was very noticeable. But if you went through to the sort of like into the other areas where there was marketing and sales, and it was a lot more those sort of outgoing people who wanted to be social and make connections, it was a completely different environment. So if you stuck an introvert in that environment, it would just be like noise, constant noise, and they wouldn't be able to focus because they're so attuned to everything. They would catch everything and end up not being able to focus on what they needed to. So, you know, those things are really important when we're thinking about work and introverts at work, certainly.
Yeah, and I know there's more work in that space. There's a company doing some work called Adventures in I Don't Know, and they go into organizations to just explore this idea of not knowing, and what is it like to not know, and how can we sit in that philosophical space and ponder as opposed to race to. And I think there's something really interesting in that. And there's also something that you said there that really caught my attention about the environments that we're in. That's it. You know, what are the environments that we're in, and are the environments we're in conducive to us being our best selves, whether that's our working self or our personal self, or I guess we're all the same self, but, you know, are we aware of what environments enable us to be at our best? I think that's that, you know, do we think about that? Do we go, oh, that's the best environment for me, so that's where I need to put myself?
I think, you know, we probably know it internally. We know that I'm better in this space, or I enjoy this space more, but we still go with but this is the workspace that I've got, and this is how I need to, you know, I can't do anything about it. And going back to that deep workbook, you know, they did he talks about some research done about giving a task to a group of people who'd walked in nature for 20 minutes versus a group of people who'd walked through a busy city for 20 minutes. And at the end of it, the people who'd been out in nature were able to focus and do a lot more of the task than the people who'd been in the busy city. So there is that need for connecting with nature, which is, you know, increasingly hard in cityscapes. And I've always been curious about the idea of biophilia design, where you bring more of nature into the office and into the workspace, more textures and things like that. So when I worked at Innocent for a while, and there was a lot of textures in the workplace that just made it more interesting than just loads of walls and desks everywhere. And there's a huge, I think there's the opportunity to do so much more. But again, it's this, how can I knowing that I like being in quiet, how can I make sure I get that quiet? So is that I need to just make sure that every couple of hours I go for a walk outside? Do I just take myself off out just so that I can reset, come back in again? There are solutions to it, but it's going to be individual for each person, and also the surroundings that are in. I mean, I ended up gauging whether I'd work with a company based on the surrounding area that they were in. If they were in a business park and it was just concrete everywhere, I knew that I would struggle with that because I wouldn't be able to get out. And just sit quietly and hopefully far enough away from the office for nobody to come and sit next to me and have a chat. And it's not that I didn't want to chat with them, I just needed that downtime.
It's really interesting because I think about how the hybridness of our current working environment. So, COVID kind of pushed everybody to work from home, and now we're in this hybrid space of half home, half work, or variations of that. And talking to people that are going, well, I don't want to go back because I've got everything I need here, the comforts of my surroundings. And noticing that where my desk sits here, just in front of me out the window, it's just a landscape of trees. I'm in central London, but there's loads of trees around. And how often when I'm contemplating and thinking about what I need to do, I'll just kind of have a look at the trees and check out the squirrels and the birds and just kind of just allow that to kind of come into the space. And I remember it wasn't until I did a conversation with somebody who did walking coaching that I realized how much I use that external space to help sort of, I don't know, whether it's calm my nervous system or my thinking to flow, or just allow that downtime to happen within my workspace.
Yeah, and it's something that you mentioned positive intelligence. One of the tools that we use in positive intelligence is looking out and noticing things. It's a mindfulness, but it's observing textures and colors. I mean, I've got two different maple trees. So I've got one red maple tree and one green maple tree outside my window, and then there's a stone wall of the house next door. And I'm just watching the leaves blowing in the breeze, but it does help step out of that constant inner thinking, that constant evaluation and judgment of every thought that you're having and every idea that comes up. If you can switch out of it, then you can quieten that voice down. It's creating that space where we can thrive has been put on the back burner, to creating spaces where we can get as many people in as possible, and make sure everybody's collaborating and doing all the teamwork, where again, introverts often work better on their own and then come back to the team. So that constant collaboration, or hot desking, which is complete horror for me. You sort of like, I don't want a hot desk, I want to know where I'm going. Somebody might sit next to me who's really, really talkative, and then I'd just be exhausted. But but then I've noticed since I left work, working in corporate and set up my own business, I'm at home all the time. And I realize that I miss that being part of a team. So it's not that introverts don't want to be part of the team, and it's not that we don't like people. It's just that we need smaller amounts of them at a time. And it's recognizing that actually I do need that interaction, that I do need those conversations, I do need to bounce ideas off people, because if you're constantly on your own, you've only got your head to deal with, and that can send you mad, can't it? Just sitting there spinning thoughts around in your mind, going, what about this and what about that?
And you're saying there about teams and collaborating, and there's something really interesting, because we talk a lot about, or I talk a lot about collaboration and how do we work together and how do we work out our best, but there is also that there's an invitation to be had when working in teams and collaborating to explore, well, what do you need to be a good collaborator? Do you need to go off and think about it? Do we need to spend 10 minutes writing our thoughts down before we share? Do we need to have a conversation and then go off and come back the next day? What's the dance that we need to create as a team to enable the best of everybody to exist in a space. And it makes me think about diversity. You know, we've got diversity of the way people operate, but diversity of cultures, diversity of thinking, that brings this beautiful mix into the pot that allows us then to create, you know, I don't know why I'm caught on food today, but a more spicy dish.
Yeah.
Because a more flavoursome dish, because we're
Yeah.
kind of going, oh, we've got this idea and that takes longer to come through, and as opposed to a kind of that fast food kind of meal.
Yeah. When you're hungry again, like half an hour later.
Yeah.
You know, you want a satisfying meal, don't you? You want all the flavours in there, and for it to be balanced. And we're not getting that. We're getting the sort of, as you say, the fast food version of it, which is inherently less satisfying in the long term. But it's, you know, so often when, you know, I've been in multiple brainstorming meetings, I know from my own experience, you'll be sitting there seeing somebody write an idea up, but you'll be already judging it, or you'll already be coming up with your own solution, or how your solution is going to either work with that or be better than that. You know, you're not truly sitting there going, oh, that's, you know, that's quite an interesting idea. Well, wonder how that would work. Well, you know, what I like about that, and how can I move that forward? We're always sort of like, well, yeah, but I've got to come up with something. I need to come up with something. My idea's got to be better than that idea, or, you know, it's got to work with that idea. You know, we're always constantly judging everything.
And I wonder if that's always true. I love these conversations because I agree and I disagree. So I love that feeling of going, well, I see that. I see myself. I can imagine myself doing that. And at the same time, I also kind of am in environments where there is that, okay, well, let's take 5 minutes to go away and think about that, and let's pause for that. And as I'm saying that, I'm wondering if those environments are created by people that have done this thinking and have gone, actually, in order to get the best out of my team, instead of pushing them to get there, I need to create spaces for them to arrive there. And I need to create spaces for the different types of people. You know, some of the work I do, that we talk about psychometrics, and whilst I'm not you know, I don't do DISC or strength finders or as part of my own practice, I'm aware of them, and some of the groups I work with, they will go, well, what are you like, so that we can work with you in your best way, and we can understand how we all fit together. And at times I find that really refreshing, because somebody goes, Robert likes this when he's working, and so likes that when they're working. So when those two work together, there's going to be a natural tension that they need to be aware of. Or, you know, I've got a colleague that I work with, and when we both work together, we both like to talk, so we always overrun. We have to be mindful of this fact that we both like to talk, and we'll just keep on going, and we need to go, actually, there's a time limit here, so how do we manage that? So there's something, you know, really refreshing where organizations are looking at, and individuals for that matter, are looking at, well, what are my needs, and what are the needs of those around me? So how do we find a way to meet those needs, to get the best out of ourselves, or to get the most authenticness out of ourselves in the spaces that we are working, whilst recognizing that sometimes we need an outcome, sometimes we need a product, sometimes we need a result.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember when we did the insights psychometric set. I've had, you know, I've done Belbin, I've done Myers-Briggs, all sorts, but the insights one was that kind of went to the point of saying, oh, Alison always likes to buy birthday cards for her friends and relatives. I'm like, how on earth did you get that from this questionnaire? I mean, where did that come from? But yes, I do. I always buy birthday cards and things. So everything's in my calendar. But it was really interesting, because I ended up on that with, I was the coordinator role. I was this sort of like, in the colours, it was a green blue. So liked the data bit, but also liked collaborating and making connections with other people and bringing people together, and, you know, hooking people up with the right person for that job. But my manager at the time was very much more into the red area, which was very directional, very fast, didn't want to spend time going into detail. There's me as a detail person. And, I spent years doing these really detailed presentations, giving everybody all the information because I thought it was all fascinating. And I'd be met with blank faces going, it's one of Alison's presentations. And, the amount of times I was told to make it into bullet points, and I go, but there's so much more to this than just bullet points. Anyway, it turned out that one of the things that frustrated us between me and my manager was that she would rock up at my desk, and I would have gone through a massive calculation. I'd worked everything out for this particular forecast that I was doing at the time. And she'd sit down and ask me how I got to my number, and my mind would go blank. And I felt like an absolute idiot. Every single time she did it, she sat down and asked me a question, and my mind would go blank. And it wasn't till I realized that actually most of because I'm an introvert, I work in long-term memory rather than short-term. So it takes a longer time for it to come back. So recall is a bit of an issue. I understood why that was, and I didn't feel stupid anymore. But through the insights, we sort of like short-circuited that and that realization. And basically they said, well, your manager needs to have everything in short form, bullet points, doesn't want to go into all the details, just wants to know the headline stuff. Alison needs to prepare. So when you're going to have a conversation with Alison, let her know in advance what you're going to have a conversation about, so she can then access her long-term memory in this case, or get her, her mind in that framework, because I can't switch from one completely different thing to another completely different thing. And so that really made such a difference. It was just sort of like all the pressure was off. Okay, I'll let Alison know in advance what I want to talk about. Then I would reply in bullet points. And we were both happy.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's like it makes complete sense. But yeah, I wonder how many people are in distress or tension within their working environments or their relationships for that matter, because their communication styles aren't the same, but they just haven't taken the time to go, well, how do you like to communicate? And how do I like to communicate? And explore that so that when they get to a conversation or a meeting, they already know, well, this is what Alison needs, and this is what Robert needs, and this is how this meeting needs to go, and this is what somebody needs in advance, and this is what somebody needs in that moment in order to make that work. And it's just kind of making me think about, why people don't take the opportunity to do things. From a coaching perspective, when I think about, people have these ideas and these things they want to do, what might stop them doing it might be the conversations they're having aren't with the people that understand their communication style. So they're not hearing or being heard in the way that they need in order to go, right, I'm going to do that thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that, I think that's one of the powerful things about coaching is those conversations where you explore that other person's point of view and help them create those, make those connections in their own thinking. They might have got this like inkling of an idea, but it's not fully formed yet. And if they talk to the wrong sort of person who is very solution driven or hasn't got time to sit with that, they'll just sort of like give them a solution, cut them dead, and that'll be it. That the idea that was just sparking will be snuffed out. And it's so important to be able to have that space. But again, if we're not creating the space, if we're not creating the time and that acceptance that we do need space to think and to come up with better solutions, if we're constantly on and working at speed, then people don't have time. If they're judged on their results, if we're measured on our results all the time, it creates this need to have a result. And if you don't, then your whole being is at risk, isn't it? If you don't get the results that you're tasked with. Whereas if we focused on change and development and growth, that would change the conversations that we have with other people.
And as you were talking there, it reminded me of I had some coaching with Lucy Gourlay, who's a time to think practitioner, and just that spaciousness was glorious. You're just allowed to just explore and explore and explore, and then she very masterfully just allows it to come somewhere, arrive somewhere, and just kind of hands it back to you, and it sort of made me go, yeah, we need more of that.
We need more of that. Yeah, and it's not just introverts who need it. Extroverts need it as well. Just because we say extroverts are more social doesn't mean they don't need quiet time. It doesn't mean that they don't need reflective time. They just have a different ratio. To introverts need like 80% quiet time, and extroverts need 20% quiet time. But we both need that time to think and make those connections and build those steps forward.
I love this stuff. It's so fascinating, that exploration of what is it that we need in order to be at our best and to be our most authentic. And it's, there's something really beautiful about how you're creating a space, I guess, not just for introverts, but also for introverts to kind of sit with and recognize what is it that they need, and to get okay with that, what they need as well.
Yeah, and and recognize that. I mean, there's been this idea that introverts can't make great leaders, but they absolutely can. They can, because they give other people space, because they need it themselves. They will give other people space. They will take ideas on board and think about them. They won't just try and move on to the next idea or think their idea is best. So when it comes to high performing teams, introverts are much more able to bring the best out of them, because they encourage people to take the lead. They take a step back. They're not leading from the front. They're leading within the group. And that's what a high performing team needs. They don't need somebody to sort of like, follow me, everyone. They've got their own identity, their own ideas. And it's that sort of, there's a huge strength that's been missed, and that until the introverts understand it for themselves, they won't be able to start moving the agenda forward. So, that's what I hope, is that the more we can get comfortable with the fact that we are different, and there, there's every range from introvert to extrovert to ambivert in the middle. We're not one size fits all, and we'll be different in different situations with different people. So it's not like there's a label, that's how you'll be, but there's an understanding and acceptance of how we, as you say, thrive. How do we get that spark to burn into a flame and light up the work that we do and the people around us?
At the beginning, I said that you were an author, and you said not yet. But that sounds like a book to me. That right there sounds like that book, that exploration of how do we understand ourselves as introverts, and just recognize what that means for us. I think there's something there to be had.
Indeed.
So, we're coming towards the end of our time together, Alison. I'm just curious if people want to. Well, I've got two questions actually. One question is how do we find you? And the other question is, what's next for you in this wonderful world of work that you do?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a profile on LinkedIn, but I also have a website, alisonmuircoaching.com. And I have a Facebook page as well, but LinkedIn or my website. And I have a free call, so it's always lovely to have a conversation with someone, even if they're not thinking about working with me. It's just, I love those conversations, exploring what's going on, exploring those hopes for the future. So I've just finished doing the foundation of the positive intelligence course, which, really aligned with my wish to create this ripple around the world. That's the whole premise behind it, is to bring more coaching impact into the world, because the thinking and the behaviors that have led us to where we are now are not the same thinking and the behaviors that are going to get us out of the situations that we're in. And so I'm really excited about bringing that more into my work, and simplifying things, because there's so many different constructs and methodologies. If you can just simplify it down into these 12 saboteurs and 5 sage powers, and people understand that and work with it, then you can start having more of an impact, because you can apply it in so many different areas. It's not just sort of limited to one area of your life. You can apply it in every single area of your life, and therefore the impact is going to be that much more profound. And again, creating that shift change, that's what I'm excited about, is really creating that shift change in how we view ourselves and how we work with ourselves. Because the first sage power is empathy, but it's not just empathy with others, it's empathy with yourself, and really understanding who you are and allowing yourself to comfort the part of you that's been being protected over all these years, that inner critic, that inner judge, allowing that person to form in their entirety.
I love that empathy for yourself. It reminds me of giving yourself permission to feel, giving yourself permission to explore and meet your own needs, as opposed to not. And there's something so comforting, and it almost feels like I don't know. There's a word that I can't quite find. It feels like, not luxury. Can't find the word, but there's a word there somewhere that it feels like, well, actually, it's a necessity. It's a necessity to give ourselves empathy. It's a necessity to allow ourselves the space to heal, to relax. Yeah, and to sort of almost come home to the self, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how things are now with all the cost of living increases, coaching probably seen as a nice to have, only for the really ambitious or very successful, but actually it's something that everybody needs right now, because when you get into that scarcity mindset, you're constantly thinking about what you don't have. And research shows that you can lower your IQ as a result. You make worse decisions because you're not giving yourself space to think about things, and you're more likely to react to impulse buys and things like that, spending money you don't have. Whereas if we can get people into this more open, expansive mindset, so more of the growth mindset. I think the sage works quite well with the growth mindset concept. Is this, everything is an opportunity to learn, but is also all about taking action. It's all about navigating through the chaos. It's all about, having empathy for yourself, but also all the other people who are in the same situation, and making those stronger connections. That's what that strengthening is about, and that's what coaching can help you find. And that's what you really need when times are hard.
Absolutely, because the thing that kicks in is we start to shut down. And the beauty of coaching is it allows us to open up to see the opportunities that are there, because we just don't see them. We can't see the way through. Whereas when we are in that space of coaching, those ways become apparent to us, or possibilities or opportunities become apparent to us. And I guess part of our work is going, even within a cost of living crisis, how do we create coaching that's accessible for all? That becomes possible. Because I really hear that thing of people saying, well, I'm not an exec, so I don't need coaching. And I'm like, no, it's great for everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. It's just a brilliant thing to help you with your thinking and with your own self-awareness, your own personal development growth.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, I would love everybody to experience really good coaching at some point in their lives, because those who've had coaching really understand the benefits of it, and they will sing its praises. But there's so many people who haven't been able to experience it, because it has traditionally been, oh well, it's for the C-suites, or it's for the execs, it's for sports stars, for Olympians. That's not what it's about. It's helping you be the best you can be at being yourself. That's who are you? How are you going to show up? How can you bring that more to life? What are the right decisions for you? How can you communicate better? How can you feel more yourself? How can you bring that confidence into everything that you do? If we can get everybody into that space, you can imagine the positive impact that would have around the world. And that's just, that idea is so exciting.
Yeah. So if you want a little bit of that, as Alison says on her website, you can book a free conversation with her to have a little bit of that experience, to see what that might bring for you. And my final question for you, Alison, what's next for you? What's the thing on the horizon where you're going, yeah, that's my next plan, that's where I'm heading to, if there is one, that is?
Well, I've just been through a rebrand and launched my new website. So at the moment, I'm just sort of enjoying moving into offering a longer. So I've created a year-long coaching program to help really embed that change, sort of like when you hit those sticking points, which everybody will hit, having me there so that I can work through it right to the year, and then having, because from my planning background from when I worked in supply chain, having a plan for the year ahead. So basically 2 years worth of getting everything straight in your mind and where you're going. So I'm quite excited about being able to work with someone for a full year and see where that goes. So that's my big thing at the moment. And then expanding into working in different areas where I can bring more of the conversation of how can we make the most of ourselves at work, but also championing the introvert conversation in the workplace and bringing more understanding of that, more acceptance that we all operate in different ways. So if I can find avenues to have those conversations, I'd love to do that. So that's my hope for the future at the moment, is open up those conversations.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Alison. And if you're listening or watching and you sort of go, yeah, I have an avenue, I have an opportunity, then let Alison know, because
Let me know.
Yeah, for sure, right? Speak up. Let's share, because I think when we share, when we connect, that's part of supporting each other to grow, to take those next steps, to go beyond where we currently are. And I think Fan the Flames is very much about that. It's about this idea of how can we work together? How can we grow together? How can we find that thing that turns that little spark into that opportunity, into that flame? How do we turn those ideas, those dreams into a reality? Yeah. So please comment, please share, please ask questions. We would love to hear from you. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you so much, Alison, for joining us here today on the podcast.
Thanks, Robert. It's been a pleasure. It's been lovely to chat with you again. I always enjoy our conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Take care.